Hello and welcome to On the Corner, the official podcast of pitcherlist.com. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined, as always, by the man himself, Nick Pollack. We are inching closer to the publication of your top 400.
Oh my gosh. I'm not even kidding. It's the middle of the day on Tuesday. I have 2 teams left in the free agents, and I'm getting it done tonight. The next step from there is, it's pretty much all ranked already. And by the way, if you have PL Pro, you guys already see the rankings, which is really cool. Again, I didn't plan on sending it off to y'all. It's just, what the heck, you guys get it because you're awesome in supporting us. But tomorrow, Wednesday, is the day that I think they'll be done. So they'll either be published on Wednesday or on Thursday. The goal is on Wednesday. There's also Scott Chu's top 150. No, more than that. I think it's like 300 hitters. Something ridiculous that he's doing. So we've got both of those coming out this week. We don't want to bash heads. So one will be on one day, one on the other. But yeah, finally, Eric. Oh my gosh, it's top 400. It's like, I think I wrote more words than I did last year. And last year was 80,000 words. So yeah, enjoy this one, guys.
Everybody knew 400 was going to take a little while. As always, you can find my top 150, which is not 400, but that's already.
That's pretty amazing too, Eric.
And I've already changed some things, not on the document, not on the article itself, but again, as you and I keep talking to it, as I keep listening to your amazing team by team roundups that you can find over on the Pitcher List podcast feed. I recommend, going down and looking at that, listening to those. If you're a PL Pro member, Nick is putting up the articles over on PL Pro as well. I think that those have been great for my process after I get the rankings. And it's like, I don't make drastic changes, but sometimes I'll move somebody up or down a few spots, listening to you kind of dive into it. And I start to then think about that compared to my own beliefs in that person.
Well, that's how it should be done, because I think what's really important is that, guys, my rankings are not infallible by any means. And really what I think is most helpful is to say, look, this is what I'm weighing. And if you guys feel differently about certain weights, awesome. Then make those adjustments yourself, kind of, right? I will have the ones that I have, then ultimately that's it. But, it's important to understand the weights and why.
It's about understanding if the narrative you have in your head of the pitcher is backed up by what we're seeing. And some of what I like about listening to yours is I have a story about this pitcher, and then you have some of the statistical stuff you mentioned in the podcast. And I'm like, oh, so maybe that aspect of who this pitcher isn't as ironclad as I thought. And then that won't make me say, hey, I'm going to drop him 10 spots. But it's like, okay, if I like the pitcher or the pitcher or two behind them, maybe I'll drop them a little bit, because now, again, I'm just reflecting on the narratives I'm telling. So take that into consideration. Nick will get through some of that on these 5x5 episodes that we're doing. And then obviously you can listen to those other individual team podcasts if you want to get the breakdown of a particular pitcher. So we are ostensibly outside of the top 30 right now, starting at number 31. However, there was some change in the rankings after the last episode. So we will explain all of that to you in a second, but we are jumping to number 27 here. And it's Framber Valdez. Framber Valdez, I believe, was going to be 31 for you. And you've
it was somewhere around there, something like that.
So Framber Valdez is 27. Logan Webb will be number 28, and we'll fill out the rest of the 30 there. But why did you move Framber Valdez up? Why do you have him here at 27? And just for comparison's sake, I have Framber Valdez at 31.
Okay, so it's really difficult. I've been trying to figure out where am I supposed to put him, and the real issue is that I have this cherry bomb tier of guys that I feel are more variable in terms of, are they going to see their ceiling or not? And we'll get an understanding of that. While Framber, it's actually interesting. I could even say he's that too, because we saw the floor in the first half last year and then the ceiling in the second half of last year. And I want to remind everybody how bad it was. It was a 130 whip with an ERA above 380 through the first full 3 months. And then it wasn't until July 4th that it was a sub 2 ERA, a sub 1 whip with a 30% K rate. And that's because all of a sudden his curveball came back and it was amazing and beautiful. And that's that. And it bothers me. Like, as a fantasy manager, it just drives me up the wall that Framber Valdez is someone that some games he has that curveball working, some games a sinker is going over the plate, and guys are hitting that because he's a ground ball guy, and there's a lot of variance in that. And also, I was thinking to myself, my gosh, Alex Bregman isn't returning. There's that bad defense is going to get even worse. However, I wasn't taking into consideration that Christian Walker is joining, and Christian Walker is essentially the best defensive first baseman. And I will say that third base is better and more important. With Paredes is going there, he's kind of neutral, but Jose Abreu is bad, so there's a big swing there, and it does make a difference.
But if they put Jose Altuve in the outfield more, and that means more Mauricio Dubon in the infield. Mauricio Dubon was a Gold Glover, so then you're getting a little better at second base as well. And that's not going to be an every inning thing or an every game thing, but that is a little boost to the second base defense, because Altuve at his age was getting slightly worse defensively.
Yeah, that's a great point too. I didn't even know that one. So I was a little too harsh on that initially. And I think, look, ultimately when you're drafting this high, it is a set and forget. And yes, I recognize that Valdez, in all likelihood, is not actually going to harm you for the full year. It is still so frustrating. And I can see how close it is to him just imploding. I mean, he did for 3 months last year. And then really having the best curveball of his career to have, honestly, a peak run in order to save that season. And I normally get really negative when those things happen. When guys have to have stupid good runs in the second half to save and mask how bad it was in the first. I've seen that with Jack Flaherty in the past, and that didn't turn out well. I've seen that with Eduardo Rodriguez in the past. And I just, it really bothers me internally. But then again, it happened to Blake Snell, and that happens every year. And I don't know. Freddie Peralta's done that before too. So I've been going back and forth of like how reliable this is, but fine. Winning ball club. He should get a fair number of strikeouts. It should be okay. It shouldn't be a 123 whip. It should probably like a 117. I even went on Beat the Shift, and I was suggesting that Valdez could have an ERA above 350, and they freaked out about it because he's never really done it or all this kind of stuff. And I was like, all right, board bet with him at 3.45 is the ERA. But then I said to myself, that's the wash, Nick. Then come on, put him at 27. Don't put him in the 30. You got to expect a little bit better than some of those other guys. So, okay, Framber Valdez at 27.
Yep. For me, primary fastball that gets hit hard gives me a little discomfort.
Yeah, that's the root of all of it.
And so, there are just some other guys I put a little bit ahead of him, but a 31 to me is like you're rock solid SP2.
We're not getting him, Eric.
No, we're not. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. And your number, then Logan Webb, as I mentioned, became number 28, and then an entrance into your rankings at 29, another guy who would have been outside of your top 30, is, I refer to him as Sugar Shane. You refer to him as Mick Shane. It's Shane McClanahan. It's Shane McClanahan, number 29.
I am going to show you guys on the screen right now, if you're watching on YouTube, this beautiful thing I made. It's my magnum opus. It's Mick Shane as McBain. And today, Eric, you sent me something, didn't you?
I did.
What did you send me?
It was a video footage from Mark Topkin, who was at the Tampa Bay Times, who's a good follow if you want all Tampa Bay news. And he had a 50-something second video of Shane McClanahan's first live BP today, where he was hitting 97, 98 on the radar guns. And, listen, first year back, he's been off Tommy John. I mean, now it's like 15 months. But, we love seeing that velo early in spring, back, ready to go. Command of the secondaries obviously is going to be a thing coming off Tommy John. I got into a long discussion about whether McClanahan can be an SP2, SP3 type in fantasy baseball this year. I'm a big fan. I think the Rays have said they're going to, get him around 150 innings this year. So I think expecting 140, 150, even if you're baking in regression for McClanahan, because, he's might not be as kind of like locked in post Tommy John as he was before. I mean, he was like a low threes ERA pitcher with a strikeout rate that could push 30%. So if you're thinking he's like a 3.4 ERA guy with a strikeout rate around like 27% or whatever, like that's still a very good pitcher.
Yeah. So these are the things I've been wrestling with. At the time of the ranking initially, I didn't know if the velocity was there or not. And to see that is just like, okay, that's really cool. I believe it's saying he's sitting instead of hitting.
Yes. Sorry. True.
It does, right? And that's a really important distinction. Clocking up to, so he's hitting, he's hitting 97, 98, which is not sitting, but that generally means you -2 or 3. So it's like he's sitting 94 or 95.
Early in spring.
Which is also early in the spring, exactly, which is totally fine. Everything's good. And really, we just got to make sure that there was no setbacks, no nothing. Like, you have your flow and you should be great. The reason that I don't have McShane in my top 15 like I did in November, and I do want to mention the CBS podcast, I believe it was Scott White, who mentioned that I had McShane inside my top 15. That was a November rank, Scott. Okay. All right. That's before any news of what's going on. I just kind of assumed everything would be fine. I didn't know about the Steinbrenner field changing, which is a big deal, I think. It's going to impact everyone on the Rays negatively. I also had a larger time to assess what it means to be 150 innings. And there are two types of guys when it comes to expecting volume. There's the DeGrom, Glasnow, Sales side. And those are the guys that are generally going to go normally until they are hurt, for the most part. Maybe not Glasnow as much, but definitely DeGrom, definitely Sale. But then there's the McClanahan side, which is kind of like the prospect side, where this is a guy who is not going to get his innings limited by a time on the IL, but rather the team stretching or shrinking starts, I should say, and then skipping here and there and making it so he just doesn't have as much of a workload without the IL stint. And that's a massive change, because with DeGrom, it's DeGrom plus whoever you replace him with in that roster spot. And that's that's such a big difference. That's so huge. So, and especially like Spencer Strider is another one. You get a roster spot in April. That is amazing, right? And you expect the top quality later. So because of that, I had to lower McClanahan, mixed with the George Steinbrenner field stuff, and also no report of him pitching yet or anything like that. Seeing him sit at this point, I feel very good about it. And I have him the very top of the cherry bomb tier. I might even raise him up further and be like, guys, this is an ace. I don't even care. Like, he's just dominating the spring, and I have him at like 20 or something like that. But Shane McClanahan, I think, is getting too undrafted at the moment. I would love to have him on all my teams.
Yes, I'm a big fan of his, where he's going right now in drafts. Obviously, that then shifted some of the guys we had already talked about in previous episodes. It moved Roki Sasaki to 30th. It moved Brian Wu to 31st. It moved Grayson Rodriguez to 32nd. And then we get back into our rankings at number 33, who we'll talk about after this break. Number 33 for you, Professor Chaos, Freddie Peralta. It's nice that he's in this with Framber, in my opinion, not because they're the same pitcher, but because there's this idea that, like, there's just going to be stretches where you're like, I don't really know how this is going to go right now.
Yeah. It's so annoying.
And I think you and I both feel more confident in Framber than Freddie Peralta. I have Freddie Peralta 38, but the big thing I think you probably address is the change in extension on the fastball, which is huge for Freddie Peralta.
I do want to clarify. I don't know if we're actually more or less confident. It's more about understanding. Let's say we have the same evaluation of Peralta. Then it's about how is that evaluation relative to the rest of the field, right? So I think we're pretty much on the same page about this. And what's interesting about Freddie Peralta is that last year, a few things were not good. One, he lowered his extension. It went down. This was the guy that when he showed up, his debut was in Coors, and we're like, we're not going to do that. And then he dominated, and we go, well, how did you do that? And this is before that I had all this extension data, and really I had my my enlightenment when it comes to a lot of this stuff about a year and a half ago, really, once I started getting stuff with Kyle Bland and being like, hey, cool, here's all these data points. And I didn't have it back then, but yeah, 7 feet of extension. Now it's 6.7 for Freddie Peralta. And that is not as exceptional. It does not make his fastball as good as it used to be. It also means that he doesn't get as flat, because when you have a larger extension, that means you're essentially going further down the mound. And then you are a little bit lower on that release. The further out you go in extension, typically we do see a flatter release. So, man, that hurts too for this fastball. It needs it. And you had a vert that was really high at the beginning of the year and then dropped as the season went on that four-seamer. But then there's the whole other aspect of, hey, Freddie Peralta became who he is and the guy that we like once the slider showed up. However, that slider became a 55% strike rate at 31% usage. That was against right-handers we're talking about. I mean, that's just, you can't do that. And Freddie Peralta is a cross-body mechanic guy. This is the kind of thing I generally like to avoid. Zach Galli is the one that really taught me that after being in on him after such a successful 2019 season. Or maybe it was 2018 season. I don't remember which one it was. It was back then. And the point was maybe 17. It was maybe even actually it was 2017. And the whole point of this is that Freddie Peralta is Professor Chaos because of this crossbody mechanics where it's rhythm based. We had a 2023, we had an amazing second half and it saved a season. And it wasn't really carried over into the next one. I don't think that Freddie Peralta is going to hurt your teams. I think he's still going to be productive. He's going to have these highs and lows, and it should normalize out to be a very productive season. Just not as productive and stable as others, so I don't have him as high. But I think the floor of others is lower. Even when I talk about all these bad things about Peralta, I have more faith that he will have those ceiling type stretches, those amazing looking like an SP1 stretches. So that's still there. You can maintain like a 27% striker rate throughout the year, but it's just frustrating. And I hate drafting frustrating. So I'm not really in on Freddie Peralta, but I recognize that he is still going to be generally productive for your teams.
Yep. Not much more to say there. I agree with that as well. We got another injury recovery guy here in your starting pitcher number 34, who's Sandy Alcantara. And to me, like, I wasn't drafting Alcantara when he was an SP1 because I thought personally there wasn't a strikeout upside, and we talked about the defense and all that. And now he's going really kind of like as an SP3 in drafts, and I think that's really fair considering Alcantara has poor team context, but we know who he is as a pitcher, and he's probably going to give you solid ratios, and the strikeout rate isn't going to be super high, and he's not going to get tons of wins, but he's not really going to hurt you anywhere.
I'm wearing my Cole Reagan shirt, and I just want to make sure it's clear, guys, that I had my Sandy Crush shirt in the wash. Okay. Otherwise I would be wearing it today. The thing about Sandy Alcantara is that I might be raising him as spring goes on, especially to see how long they're letting him go in his spring starts.
Sure.
Because the biggest pushback that I have, which makes all the sense, is that, yeah, he's a volume guy, right? He's the one that his value came in not by having a 30% K rate. It's by having a 26% over 200 plus innings or whatever. And then also having this ridiculous stuff that returns a good, whip and ERA and all that kind of stuff. Well, this year, considering he's coming off of Tommy John, we don't expect him to go that long into games, or at least be limited in some way without an IL stint, which is kind of like the Shane McClanahan thing of like 150, 160. I mean, 60 even feels like you can't do that to a guy coming back from the IL of Tommy John, right? That just doesn't seem okay. So it's really hard to make out where we should be putting Alcantara. He threw a bullpen where he was going like soft and easy at 94, 95. And it was just like, everyone was making sure he wasn't throwing harder, which sure. I think is like, he's fine. He threw 99 in a bullpen in September, right? But I really am going to monitor how many innings he goes. If he's going like 5 innings and he's allowed to go 80 pitches in the spring, I would imagine he can comfortably go 6 a lot. And I think what's important with Alcantara is I would imagine the Marlins are more so going to be tracking either pitches per start or games started rather than innings. So a lot of people are going to say, oh man, all the innings. Well, look, if you throw 3 pitches for an inning, that should be equated to a guy who throws 20 pitches in an inning. And Alcantara has been known as a very efficient pitcher because it's just these fastballs are just really hard to hit, and the changeup and whatnot and so on and so forth. He's so good and I miss him so much. But yeah, Sandy Alcantara to me doesn't have the same ceiling because of that lack of volume. But if he were normal Sandy Alcantara, I would probably have him, I want to say like at 15 or something like that. Because I just believe in the ratios and the steady strikeout rate. I just wish he was on the Marlins, man.
Yeah.
That's not a good defense behind him either. And that's going to hurt him.
He might not be after a while. And yeah, that lack of volume, I think, is what puts him in this range, which makes it a fair range for me. I will just note next year is his last year under contract with the Marlins. Then he has a club option, but it's for like $22 million, and it's the Marlins. And like, yes, you would keep Sandy Alcantara for $22 million, but the Marlins may not want to do that. I just think there's a world, because his name was already floated in off-season trade rumors. There's a world where the Marlins just treat Sandy Alcantara like normal Sandy Alcantara this year, deal him at the trade deadline, because he'll have one more year of team control for whoever takes him back. They can get a haul for him and then not have to worry about paying that salary. He'll be like,
I mean, would you want to trade for Sandy Alcantara at the deadline if they've treated him like that?
It depends. If you know that you have him under control for next year plus a club option for the year after for $21 million for a team that is not cheap, you may think, okay, maybe what
I would say is what I would do then if I'm the Marlins is say, Gray, I'm going to throw him for 4 innings for the first couple months to make him even more appealing as a trade option, right?
You could. And then they get the Garrett Crochet thing.
And that would be just so annoying. Just do the reverse Garrett Crochet season, guys.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Oh, that's going to be so frustrating.
The last guy here, the 35th ranked pitcher, Luis Castillo. I have Castillo 24th still. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just still living in the past too much.
You're doing yourself dirty. When it comes to Castillo, I just kind of see a guy who gets worse before he gets better. And that's really at the end of the day why I have this ranking. It's really tough for me this year because we have so many guys. Based on my assessment of Castillo, I would normally have him at like 23. But because we have so many talented pitchers now, it's really hard for me to accept that Luis Castillo is going to be a lot better than like the 3.65 ERA 117 whip that he had last year. His fastball is getting worse. He hasn't found his old changeup, and it's just difficult really for me to do that. Also, there's any changes, of course, in Seattle, then that's even worse. But I don't think there are at this point. Luis Castillo just seems to me as someone who has all the signs of decline as opposed to redemption in the year ahead. And considering that, I'd rather chase guys with very similar floors and a higher ceiling. It's that simple.
Yeah, I get it. As I mentioned, when I looked at did my article where I looked back at my rankings from last year, I was ignoring that he continued to give up increasing amounts of hard contact and contact in general. And I think that's something we need to keep in mind, that it's not all of a sudden going to course correct. So maybe Luis Castillo needs to move down for me. I still think you'd be okay if he's your SP2. He feels like there might not be a lot of upside there, but it feels like relatively safe. Like he won't implode, but maybe he will. Who knows? I guess we'll have to check that out. To me, he falls in a similar bucket to your number 36 starter, who we'll get to on the next episode. So make sure you tune in to check that out. I'm Eric Samulski, the Pelican.
I'm Nick Pollack, the Lion.
And we'll keep going here on the next episode of On the Corner. Right. I'm going to start. We ready to jump right in? I'm going to start it at 23:30, just so it's right in the middle.
All right. We're going to go a little quicker on this one. Yeah. We're going to catch it up, and we're going to get you out of here in 32 minutes.
We got it. We're good to go. Not 32 minutes. Doesn't be that fast. Hello and welcome to On the Corner, the official podcast of PitcherList.com. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined on his journey through the top 100 by Nick Pollack. Nick, we are up to starting pitcher number 36 today. We're slowly climbing through.
We're getting there, and I'm so excited to have this top 400 out. Oh my gosh, it has been a lot. If you guys enjoyed it, you want to read it ad-free, we are lowering the price of PL Plus. That's just the ad-free experience in Discord to only $5 a month for the entire year. It's the best way to just join, I think, the greatest baseball community on the internet. So consider that. Or, of course, if you want all of our premium fantasy tools, you can get a PL Pro for 15% off with promo code podcast. So consider that, support the site. But we got to talk about number 36. Who is that, Eric?
We do, and I teased it on the last episode because I said number 35, Luis Castillo, reminded me a little bit of number 36, Aaron Nola, in the sense that both of these guys are probably on the downsides of their careers. The narrative in our heads is that they are maybe not aces anymore, but they are safe, reliable starting pitchers. I came into the the rankings process with the idea that like both of them feel like really safe SP2s. And then the more that I start looking into it, the more that I pick up on some of like the handedness stats that you talk about, the more that I look at like your Phillies podcast episode about like, I think the decreased effectiveness of Nola's curveball, the more you're realizing that maybe they're both like low end SP2s. Maybe they're just like kind of boring guys who no longer have the upside and are getting surpassed by the Grayson Rodriguez and Bibes and Schwellenbachs and Bryce Millers and all that of the world.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And it's kind of funny. Aaron Nola and Luis Castillo were two of the guys that I really hung my hat on or really like leaned into. I don't know, hang my hat, whatever. I was really into, became like Knicks guys or whatever back in 2015 and 17. And here they are now still kicking and being productive. But yeah, they aren't the guys of old. Aaron Nola's changeup is not really doing the things it needs to do. I like the little changes he made with going more inside with sinkers to right-handers. I like that he's trying to elevate with his four-seamer 2 strikeouts and take advantage of how flat his attack angle is. But the curveball is not the greatest curveball in the majors anymore. It's not this 40% plus CSW pitch. And it's a little bit more of a struggle. He's only had one season in the past 4 years with a hit per 9 under 8. And typically when we talk about sturdy, solid pitchers, we want to see around a 7. When we see an 8, that means it's an elevated whip season. And yeah, it was a 117 whip for Aaron Nola last year, actually 120, and it was a 115 last year and 113 the one in 2021. I think that whip is kind of going to stay there. The main difference between his 2023 and 24 with the ERA difference, that is 446 versus 357, that was mostly left on base rate, with a really bad one at 66 and then a good one at 79%. The home run rates are pretty much the same. The hit rates are pretty much the same. And I get a sense that the 80%, yeah, probably a little bit lucky. It's not really much of a different pitcher. Even though I told you about those differences with a sinker and the four-seamer and all of this, he's kind of the same hit per 9 guy. And those that want to say, oh no, he's different now from that bad year, we make the joke, even year, odd year, old Nola. This is odd year Nola, guys. And that's bad. So long story short, he should probably be under 4 ERA, sure. But the whip, if you expect underneath 115, you're not going to be happy with it. This is more of a 15-team volume play because he should get wins and strikeouts.
Yeah.
Right. And I think with at least Luis Castillo, I have a little more faith in the chance that he gets better. But with Nola, this is kind of what it is. So you're going to have to stomach 200 innings or 180 innings, whatever it is, of a slightly elevated whip and slightly elevated ERA to get there. And I really hope to see like the 3 ERA or so from Nola, 110 whip. That'd be great. But it's just really hard to expect that at this point.
Yeah, I have him 31 right now. I'm debating dropping him under, the Brian Woos and Bryce Millers and Jared Joneses and all that of the world. And that safety might not be there anymore. That safety was never really there for your next guy, but he certainly has flashed some upside. It's number 37, Robbie Ray. Robbie Ray, who came back from Tommy John surgery last year, and then obviously had a hamstring injury that ended the season, but that arm issue should be behind him. Pretty good pitcher's park. We saw flashes of Robbie Ray last year looking like a pretty dominant pitcher. Obviously the inconsistency that we know with coming off surgery, but you seem to be buying in on a little bit of a bounce back for Robbie Ray.
So what's interesting about these three specifically is that with Castillo, Nola, Ray, all of them should be flirting with 200 strikeouts, right? At least around there. Castillo maybe a little bit underneath, but Nola's kind of been around there too. But honestly, Robbie Ray feels like the one that should have it. It's a TJS honeymoon situation. And he's going to go every 5 days for the Giants, which is a good place to pitch, honestly. And I love to see that the fastball held at 94 all of last year. I don't think this is the absolute volatile Robbie Ray of old. I think when he went to the Mariners, he made some good adjustments. And sure, the ERA is more in question, but the strikeouts are certainly not in question. The wins should be there too. Debatably better whip possibility than, say, Nola as well. So they're really close to each other, 3 of them. There is a little bit more of a floor that would scare you, I think, with Robbie Ray. But honestly, with what he does, I think Robbie Ray is actually a sneaky play. I think a lot of people are kind of saying, I don't know, it's too volatile, it's too ridiculous. And he's kind of shown us recently, ever since coming from Seattle in Toronto, that he's been a really sturdy guy. I mean, even in 2022, it was a 3.71 ERA, 119 whip. But that was also after realizing, hey, I need a sinker here against right-handers, so they're not just completely on my four seam. We're actually going away from them, which worked. He has that in his utility belt if he needs it. And the guy that we know from like 2008, 2019 in Arizona is kind of gone at this point. So having 2 32 start seasons and getting Tommy John and coming back, I actually feel pretty good about this moving forward.
Yep. I agree with you on that. I have Robbie Ray 37. You have him 37. But that is, I moved some things around while we were on here in terms of just some injury guys. But yeah, I think we're both in pretty much in lockstep with Robbie Ray. I spent boatloads on him in Fab last year, only to then see him get hurt, which is super great. I am certainly higher on your number 38 starter than you. You have Sonny Gray 38. I have him 30. I feel like Sonny Gray is a rock solid SP2, and I understand the team context isn't as great as it was before, but the infield defense should still be really good, with Arenado likely hanging around for probably the whole season. Who really knows what's going on there? And as you have mentioned many times, even teams that are bad need to get wins. And if the Cardinals wind up being a fairly average team this year, and I don't think they'll be bad, I think they'll be average, they're going to have to win some games. And I think Sonny Gray was really good for them last year.
So you guys are in for a treat. If you have PL Pro and you've already read the Cleveland Guardians team breakdown, you are in for a journey, because when I was doing that one on stream over the weekend, someone was asking, well, how do you expect Gavin Williams to lower his walk rate? And I said, well, it's all right here. And I realized that my process of translating walk rates and strikeout rates and ERA and whip from the arsenal isn't as well known. And I wish it were, and it could be the wrong method. I totally understand everyone. This is obviously me. So this is my whole thing. I spent his blurb in the thing is a mini article of me just explaining the things I look for each one of those stats and walking through Gavin Williams. So the reason I'm bringing this up is Sonny Gray had a 30% strikeout rate last year, and it was like a 23%, 24%. It's pretty much a strikeout inning guy for a bit now. That should surprise you, right? What the heck is going on? If there's one stat that you want to look at for strikeout rate increase, you would think it would be swinging strike rate, right? On an individual pitch. You'd be wrong. The number one is put away rate. Is there a pitch that all of a sudden jumped in its efficiency when it's thrown in 2 strike counts to put batters away? Now, obviously, swing strike rate has to do with that. If you have throw more whiffs with a pitch, that's great. But what I'm trying to get at is that Sonny Gray last year had a 40% put away rate on his sinker to right-handers. And I just want to clarify, sinkers should have like a put away rate of like 18% or so. You normally see good put away pitches around like 25%. It's really exceptional. It's at 27 or even 30. That's usually like the Glasnows of the world or whatever. And if you see a 40% on something that's actually thrown a decent amount, it's on like 5 moments, you got to say, no, that is not sticking around, right? And that's because he threw these backdoor sinkers out of nowhere and he was able to just do it. And it was called strikes. It wasn't even whiffs. So that's why you shouldn't do swing strike rate for it. It's just about was he throwing during this. There was also a sweeper that Sonny Gray was throwing to lefties. Now, hold on a second, you say, Nick, sweepers, opposite-handed batters. I know. But Sonny Gray was really, really good at getting it under the nitro zone. That is keeping it below the zone as it went across. And guys are thinking, oh, maybe this is going to stay up there. And then it doesn't. And he had an exceptional put away rate on those sweepers to left-handers as well. So against both handed batters, Sonny Gray had this ridiculous put away rate on a pitch out of nowhere. And that's not going to stick around. It's just not. So there's that. But also, on to his credit, this 3.84 ERA, that is a little weird because he had a 68% left on base rate. And traditionally, when you see a higher strikeout rate for a guy, you should see a higher left on base rate because those balls aren't going into play as much they're just ending it with an out as opposed to a ground out that will score a run or something with 1 out or whatever it is. So that's a little strange and should normalize, except that the home run rate went way up. And I just get a sense from Sonny Gray that he's a guy who should not have like a 109 whip. He's not this like 6% walk rate out of nowhere again. I don't really trust that. I think the home run rate at 114 isn't too ridiculous based on what he does. He throws like cut four seamers inside to lefties. He also doesn't get that thing away enough, actually inside enough to lefties. And then it's a little bit too much there for righties. It's kind of annoying. It was a weird season. That's really my conclusion. Very weird season. Should be a fine whip. Should be fine. He's never really an 8+ hit per 9 guy. He doesn't really walk a ton of guys. So that means the whip should be good. The ERA should be a little bit better when the left on base rate normalizes, but he's not going to have a 30% K rate, guys. He's going to have like a K an inning, and you'll be okay with it. He just doesn't go deep into games or doesn't last a lot in the season. It was 184 innings last year, 28 starts this year, 166 innings, but he also dealt with injuries for the previous 2 years. And I just get a sense that you're not going to get 13 wins on the Cardinals this year. It's just going to be worse with a strikeout rate too. And I just don't like it as much as the other ones who I think also are going to go for longer innings. So this is why they're all in this same tier together. But yeah, Sonny Gray I like least of the Castillo, Nola, and Robbie Ray group.
I get that. And speaking of not going to go many innings, we'll talk about that with our next starting pitcher, and we'll get to that after this break. So this is your number 39 starting pitcher is a little bit league specific because it is Shohei Ohtani, the starting pitcher. And obviously, depending on the format you're playing in, Ohtani may be just one player, batter and pitcher. But if you are dealing with like a Yahoo format where you have Shohei Ohtani as a starting pitcher, you have him 39. I have him down at 50th. For me, I think the concerns are innings, right? I kind of feel like, first of all, he never really threw. He was never a huge innings pitch guy before because he's dealt with multiple injuries. The Dodgers have no reason to push him back. I kind of feel like 100, 110 innings, like 110 innings feels kind of safe for me with Ohtani. Mm-hmm. And as you have mentioned on this podcast or other, I don't remember where you said it, but Ohtani will also probably not, he won't go on the IL because he is going to hit. So you're always going to have to keep him on your bench. So you're going to get probably 110 innings of a guy you can't IL. He has to be on your roster. To me, that is problematic on top of just the general, hey, what's he going to look like coming off Tommy John concerns. And so that's why I have him low.
No, I mean, man, I love it. I think I feel least confident about this one because this is the weirdest. Looking at it really right now after having another weekend of just like head down doing rankings and everything, I'm probably going to have Ohtani at 41 and move him behind the next two guys. So just so you guys know, that's Jared Jones and Jack Flaherty. And still, the whole idea of Ohtani is, let's say you were getting Paul Skeens, and if you were drafting Paul Skeens right now, and you knew you had to wait or whatever for 2 months, and you're going to get those 130 innings, like where do you draft him, right? And that's kind of where my head is with Ohtani a bit. It's frustrating as anything. And I put him after that Holly tier. I actually call it my thing Hollies, but I'm scared. And Hollies are like your stable strikeout inning guy with ratios that you're not going to drop and everything, but like it's not exciting. It's like, oh, okay, fine. So I put him after that because I feel like that's more locked value. And we're getting into the groups of, is it actually locked value? Like truly, are we okay with this? And that is Jared Jones, which I'm more hyped about now for whatever reasons. We'll get to that moment. And Jack Flaherty and Hunter Green and Carlos Rodon and Kudai Senga and Ryan Pepio, right? So that's why Ohtani's here, because yes, I do feel like he will help me. But not having that roster spot for anything for months, even for at least a month, that's going to be annoying as heck. The thing is, the quality per inning when you do get him is value, is productive. And I really love valuing that. I love just knowing that I'm going to get something out of this. But how much is it? And at the end of the day, when Ohtani begins actually being in the rotation, where do you think I'm going to have him on the list?
When he actually starts in the rotation?
Yes.
I think you'll inside the top 25 feels fair because I don't know how deep he's going into games, right? They may limit him to like 5 innings.
Yeah.
And they've said basically they're going to go to a 6-man when he's in the rotation. So then that means you're getting fewer starts per week. So you're dealing with fewer starts per week, fewer innings per start, which will cap the overall upside. But I think once he's fully in the rotation, somewhere in the top 25, 30 feels.
Yeah, that sounds
25
that sounds right. I probably would say top 20. I think he's gonna get the Aces gonna ace label. And Aces gonna ace is pretty much just saying like, yeah, you're gonna be great for my teams. I mean, even thinking 5 innings, that's gonna be well worth your time for Ohtani. And I agree with you that I think they are gonna do some shenanigans or whatever. And it's gonna be frustrating as a manager, but still like you're gonna want that roster spot on Ohtani, right? But yeah, it is really frustrating because I'm only ranking him as the individual starting pitcher. If he's combined, guys, he's the first pick in your draft. Okay. So, and the fact that he doesn't get that IL tag because he's a DH, it's just so annoying. It's right, but it's just so annoying. So do what you want with Ohtani, everyone. I'm wrestling with it of when I would actually do it. My instinct as a player on my own, I would probably not go for it because I like that roster spot and I feel that I should be more capable of filling it with something that's valuable throughout the entire time because that's me. And maybe I should be doing that with my rankings as well, theoretically, but it's also because I don't know. I spend all day on this. This is literally all I do. I don't do any other rankings. So like I should be able to do that, it's tough. It's really difficult and do whatever you guys want with Ohtani.
Yes. I will be mostly passing, but I will be mostly in on your number 40 starter. That's Jared Jones, who we love. And then we love the early spring training discussions of new pitches, which we're not going to react to this early. But Jared Jones seemed to hint at throwing a sinker.
Oh yeah, awesome. I'm a detective here. Okay, you can't get anything past me, Jared.
But I just want to say that, like, again, you've got a pitcher going into his second MLB season, who clearly learned a lot about himself and what he needs to compete at the MLB level last year. And he mentioned spending a lot of time tinkering in the offseason to refine the changeup and the curveball, trying to find that third pitch. He doesn't need both of them to be great. But if one of those two pitches takes a step forward and you've got the fastball slider combo with the improved curve or changeup, plus the added sinker to, just give another fastball variation, it's very possible that what we saw last year from Jones is not the baseline, but a stepping stone to actually a better version of Jared Jones.
Exactly. That's it. Oh man. So there's a lot of things. One, if you follow all the chaos yesterday, I'm live streaming, and then we had someone come in and say, "Hey Nick, did you notice that? Like, I think it was B2. I could be wrong. I'm really sorry. Maybe it was Drew. Maybe it was Colton. But said, hey, did you notice that Jared Jones had like 7.5 feet of extension in his MLB debut, and then it was 6.8 after that?" And I go, "What?" And I tweet this out, and I freak out, and I check our data, and that's what it says. And I'm like, guys, what's going on? What happened here? I'm trying to think, like, did he jump off like Carter Capps? I'm looking at the video. It kind of looks like he does in that first one. I don't know. And then Kyle Bland, of course, is the voice of reason. Harry Pavlidis also got involved. And he said, this has got to be a data issue. And then he was appreciative, being like, oh, yeah, this is thanks for doing this because I got to fix up my data now. And Kyle said, yeah, this is likely a MLB debut. So the calibrations are weird. And MLB corrected it thereafter because he was 6'8" the entire rest of the season, for like 3 starts of 7 feet extension. So fine. Oh, that dream fastball doesn't exist. But then I had a wonderful mention on Twitter from Purewater71, who said who shared this fantastic interview. Hannah Mears with Sportsnet Pittsburgh had this great interview and a clip with Jared Jones, saying that he has a secret pitch on top of the curveball and changeup that he's working on, which honestly, I don't really care. I don't care. I don't trust it, Jared. It's fine. But he has a secret pitch that he doesn't want to mention. But then Hannah asked great questions like, are you going to use it against everyone? And I was like, yes, that's a great question, Hannah. Thank you. And then he said, it's going to be mostly against right-handers, but maybe in time over lefties. which obviously is a sinker. We know that. That's exactly right. There's no other pitch. There's no other pitch that would be.
No other pitch that he doesn't yet have.
Yes. Right. Like a slider would be the other thing, or a sweeper. But like, nah, don't do the sweeper. And also eventually to left-handers. That's a sinker, front hip sinker. Oh boy. Yeah. And that's what he should be throwing. Because when you throw that hard and in the zone and you're near 7 feet of extension, even getting there, what you really want to take advantage of, and the hardest thing I think for hitters that we've learned is different fastballs in the zone, is different movement of it. That's hard to read at a hard velocity. We saw that Garrett Crochet, and like this is what Jared Jones should be doing. Maybe there's a cutter there too, but that really would be for lefties, not for righties. Gotcha, Jared. So I love that. I think it's also the classic Pittsburgh approach, and the way I see this is that Jared Jones has obviously elite stuff. He became too much of a book to read by the end of the year. He also lost a little bit of his command, and that's a problem. So you throw in the sinker, and that really changes a lot of it. Against lefties, you got to throw some of those. That's the sinker against righties, and then maybe the change up against lefties. I'm becoming more and more of a fan, and I'm selling myself on this. And I have him at 40 because it's a very conservative ranking. It's me being like, hey, let's be safe here. Look, we have these valued guys here that are also really good, and there's no reason you don't have to get this thing. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm probably going to reach for Jared Jones in one of my leagues at like 30 or something like that. And I just won't be able to resist.
I have him 34 right now, so I get it.
Yeah. I think he's so good. That fastball and slider are just too good. And if he has any sort of extra thing, that's it. That's all he needs.
That's it. So yeah, let's hope he gets it. We'll keep watching it in spring training, and we'll keep talking about starting pitchers on the next episode of On the Corner as we now go outside of the top 40 of Nick's starting pitcher rankings. I am Eric Samulski, the Pelican.
I'm Nick Pollack, the Lion.
And we'll check you on the next episode of On the Corner.
I can't hold it.
We're going to start this at 47, and we're going to get through it.
All right. When's he out?
Like 4:15.
Oh, beautiful.
We just have two more. We only have two more to do.
I know. I thought for whatever reason, I thought 3:30 for a second, but yeah. Go, let's do it.
Hello and welcome to On the Corner, the official podcast of pitcherlist.com. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined by Nick Pollack as we continue breaking down 5 pitchers per episode on his top 400 rankings, which are out on pitcherlist.com. We are obviously not going to get through all 400 on these episodes. We are hoping to get through 100. And then we'll probably have some episodes of like who are our favorite between 200 and 300. We'll
talk about spring training changes,
we'll do all that stuff.
Yep.
But we are going right now. We've done the top 40. We are heading into starting pitcher number 41. This is the tier called Cherry Bomb, but it's worse. This tier started with number 39, Shohei Ohtani, moved to number 40, Jared Jones, who in real time, Nick said he might move up because he's probably going to draft him earlier, maybe as an actual Cherry Bomb. And then it moves to number 41 here, Jack Flaherty. Now, Jack Flaherty, great first half of the season. Not as great a second half of the season. Winds up back in Detroit. Why are we not fully buying into what we saw early last year from Jack Flaherty?
Yeah, so Jack Flaherty is a guy who does not have a good fastball. And I want to really, really amplify that. Not a good fastball. Okay? Because he has 2 secondaries in a slider and a curveball that really carried a lot of this. And the slider was a lot worse with the Dodgers, and it started to bite him by the end of it. And the curveball was just so good out of nowhere, really, at landing at the bottom of the zone and being so consistent there. And paired with the slider in the first half of being that really good low pitch, it masked how ineffective that slider was. It really hid that pitch a little bit more than it has in the past. I'm worried that that's not going to be the case. We see this all the time from Jack Flaherty, where he goes like one half that's amazing and one half that's not. Sometimes it's the first half, sometimes it's the second half.
Sure.
And I get a big sense that Jack Flaherty is not going to be the fun, amazing sauce that he was the last year, really, because of that. And when we see guys who are so dependent on that tight command window with a bad fastball, it generally does not perform at an elite level for a full season. So I'm hesitant to believe into this. I also do like the fact that it is the Tigers. I think that's a good scenario for him. It certainly worked for him last year. And it could definitely still have like a 25% strikeout rate, could have good enough ratios along the way. I think it's going to be a bit of a ERA push up. I think the four-seamer is going to allow home runs more. And I think it's just going to be a little annoying. He's going to be a cherry bomb. He's going to go back and forth here. You're not going to drop, but it's not going to be as explosive as an ace as it was last year for Jack Flaherty.
Yep, I'm fully on board with that. I have Flaherty now at 44. So we're kind of in the same boat on Flaherty. Not fully.
I have him at 40 because Ohtani's now at 41.
Oh, boom! Moving on the spot. Your number 42 pitcher now is Hunter Green. I've talked a lot about Hunter Green, so I'll just briefly share some thoughts. You can jump in. I mentioned Hunter Green in my first Pitch Arizona presentation, which I also did for PitchCon, which you can find up on the YouTube channel. There's this narrative that because Hunter Green had a good year and because he started throwing a splitter, that the splitter was the reason that Hunter Green had a good year, and it's just not. It just does not appear to be accurate based on anything that we've seen, other than the fact that he added another pitch and maybe that kept hitters off of his two primary pitches, and so he was a little more successful. The splitter did not miss many bats. The splitter did not have a good put away rate, so it wasn't good in 2 strike counts. So Hunter Green was throwing the splitter early in counts to keep hitters off the fastball. But the splitter really it didn't grade out well. It didn't have good stats on its own. It just wasn't a particularly good pitch. Hunter Green added extension on the fastball, and the fastball performed much better, but also the fastball had pretty ridiculous hit luck, which suggests that he got a little bit lucky on the fastball. But I think Hunter Green made improvements to the fastball, which helped him pitch a little better last year. But it was not because he became this different pitcher with this new pitch. And so I think Hunter Green is basically the same pitcher that we have always kind of thought he is. And you have him at 42 and I have him at 46, and I'm happy to get him, but I won't because somebody's considering him an ace in waiting and going to take him ridiculously early.
I mean, so I really wrestle with it because the ICR marks, the contact allowed, is suggesting success, right? They dropped a ton on the fastball and the slider, which did result in lower BABIPs as well, right? And what's interesting is that you see a 5.7 hit per 9 in those 26 games started. And let me tell you guys right now, if you see under a 6 hit per 9, you go, you should instantly just know that's not repeatable. Okay. It really is not at all. Even underneath 7, you should be like, is that though? Just to give a reference point, 7.4 and 8.9 for the previous 2 years for Hunter Green. And, I'm going to do one of the things that I dislike the most to do, which is take 2 seasons worth of a metric and just average the 2.
Blend them together.
I hate doing this because that's not really what you should be doing. That said, the ICR and the BABIPs all follow the same trends in both 2023 and 2024 to link to the hit per 9, right? When we talk about ICR, we talk about BABIP. It's all about, but is he allowing hits? Like, that's the whole point of it. They all were linked. So it makes sense. If you have a really high ICR and a low BABIP, you should be questioning it. But if you have a 97th percentile ICR rate, which means that Hunter Green is allowing as much weak contact when contact happens, which isn't as frequently as others too,
right,
then it should have this low 93rd percentile BABIP, and thus you should definitely have a 90th percentile hit per 9. And the question I'm asking is really, well, you say a lot, regression doesn't come necessarily in just, it's luck. It's also regression of skills in those results itself, based on, are you going to execute that fastball at that exact moment the right way all the time to get that lower contact rate, right? The worst ideal contact. And this is really why the home runs go down. Hunter Green had a 0.72 homer per 9 last year. It was half of his 2023 homer per 9 of 1.53, right? Homer fly ball rate went down more than half. Doesn't surprise you. He's in Cincinnati. I don't think that's sustainable. That just doesn't, I just can't put all of that together in the right way. And I am going to at least give him some credit that I think he came into his own a little bit more with his fastball and his slider. But it might surprise you guys to know that he had a 16% put away rate previously on his fastball. It's like 22%. It's not like the biggest thing against right-handers, but even sliders, 16% put away rate last year against right-handers. It's like, wait, well, hold on, what? That's like really not, like none of these are ridiculous in this way. Against lefties, though, at 26%, that doesn't seem right. That seems like a little too high. So I don't know. I see Hunter Green as a strikeout guy. I see him as someone who still has a 9% walk rate, and that really shouldn't go away. I see his hit per 9 going up. I see his home run per 9 going up. And I also worry about how much we're going to see of him. I still think about that fantastic Eno table of the top 10 velocities in baseball.
Yep.
And how all of them got hurt. And so did Hunter Green for a limited amount of time. But I think his health risk is as high as anyone you really should say, based on his track record too. And you throw all that together and it's like, yeah, it's risky. And I feel a little safer with the other guys ahead of him. But I could absolutely see Hunter Green having a phenomenal season. It's very possible considering how well that fastball and slider performed last year. So good luck to him. I'm just not going to chance it.
Yes. Agreed. I'm more likely to chance it based on draft cost, at least. With the number 43 starter, Carlos Rodon, who is going significantly, well, not significantly, but going a few rounds later in drafts than Hunter Green right now. We've chatted about Rodon a bunch. This is a guy who, when he finally realized he couldn't blow the fastball by people in the same way that he used to, and started leaning into the changeup over the final, I believe it was 16 starts of the season, became just a drastically different pitcher. We have seen him. My only concern was we've seen him dial up and back the changeup usage, and that was why we talked about him when we went over my top 150. But I moved Rodon up since then. He's my number 39th ranked starter.
Oh,
I don't see any reason why Rodon would go away from the changeup now. And so if we get what we got from Rodon at the end of last season, that's a really solid starting pitcher on a good team that has great context for wins. So I'm in on Rodon this year.
Oh man, wait, do you have him higher than Clark Schmidt now?
I do. Yeah, I have I kept Clark Schmidt at 55, and Rodon is up to 39 now.
Oh man, you're higher than me now.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I think you mentioned it too. Just the innate volatility of Rodon, and over the years, it's just like you can't just get settled in. And there are a lot of times, look, this is all vibes. You want to say, right? Sure. The list is always going to be vibes. I've heard a lot of feedback on this of saying oh, people want more statistics, not what it was the projection base behind it or whatever. And I don't, if you want those kind of things, there are some amazing projection systems, but they all tell you. Ariel Cohen, I went on Beat the Ship podcast. Actually, I think the first episode's out now, if not part 2 as well, saying projection systems are bad at starting pitchers. Yes. And so I can't. I'm not going to sit here and just give you a list of ERA or PLV or something like that and call it a day. It's about I got to have some vibes in here with all the stats. And the vibes for me of Carlos Rodon is that he's not someone who just has a thing that it works and it always works.
Right.
And he's always constantly figuring things out. This fastball is good this day. It's not. The slider, yes, no. The changeup was a really big factor last year. And I want to say cool, it's a good situation. And he should get 25 to 27% strikeouts and should be a good enough whip and all this stuff. But I can absolutely see him having a 4 ERA with a 125 whip this year. Sure. That's within the realm of possibility.
Yes.
And also getting hurt again. So I wrestled with this and also with Kodai Senga of these are guys who we likely will see as hollies that are just always there. You don't drop them and they just produce throughout the year. And you're not really going to pump your fist in the air at the end of the year because it's not going to be a 2.5 ERA or something like that or some absurdity. Right. But I don't really want to draft them. It's such a weird situation because I don't feel like I'll ever really know how I'm doing with Rodon until the season ends.
But I think, yes, I agree. I think you will find that where he's going in drafts, I'll just look right now in the last 20.
Oh, absolutely. That's a good point. Yeah.
Of the last 20 RotoWire online championships, which is a 12-team league at the NFBC format, Rodon is going pick 133. They don't separate by starting pitcher. We did on the sheet with
our PL Pro app, guys. You got to use it. It's
yes.
the best.
But Rodon, the 55th overall starting pitcher. Interestingly, right after him is Jared Jones, Jack Flaherty, Kodai Senga. So everybody, they feel all like in this.
I'll take Jones all day.
Range.
I'll put it this way, at least for my teams and 12 teams right now. We're at that point. Sorry to interrupt you, Eric. Keep going.
I was just gonna say, but Hunter Green is going pick 94. So Hunter Green with an ADP of 94, Rodon with an ADP of 133. So that's almost 40 picks later.
What's so funny is like what I'm getting at is my 12 teamers. If you guys aren't joining me on the stream, by the way, the playback.tv/pitchers stream, you're doing it wrong because we all just talk about whatever you want to talk about. If you guys have questions about guys, that's what I do. I just answer your questions. And someone asked, like, all right, Nick, you usually say you want 4 starters inside the top blank, and then you kind of have your canvas to create the rest of your staff. Where is it this year? And I would say it's right around 40. And I'm probably going to have Jones inside of it, or like right at the border of it. But what's so funny about it is the way I structure 12 teamers, I'm very anti-closer. I know, just wait and saves all that kind of stuff. And I feel like it's just one of the worst bets you can make inside the top 10 rounds or so. It's just, it changes so much. And if you just listen to Rick Graham or Greg Jewett, like these guys know what they're talking about. They're amazing at what they do. Just follow them and you'll be fine. You're 12 teamers. But just go hitters for the first 6 rounds. The value there is just so much higher. And what happens is because we're talking about all these guys, we're talking about these guys that I've ranked in the 42, 43. Like, I understand why anyone would rank them in the top 30, but I have them here because there's so many. So that means that around rounds 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, I'm just going ham. Right. And I'm getting all of these, right? So that means that at 130, which is like the 11th round or so, theoretically, that could be me getting Carlos Rodon. But what I'm finding is that I'm able to get other guys instead and be more aggressive on those starters that I don't feel like I'm at a point where I want to add another starter and it's Rodon. Does that make sense? Like I'm at a point that I already have 4 and then I would want to take a higher ceiling throw because I already have the 4 that I really believe in, where I don't feel like I'd be able to make such a good decision in season with Rodon. But that might not be the case. I might be able to get him as my SB6 or something like that. And I'm like, well, yeah, all right, I'll take that. I'll go ahead. So it really does shape out when I do these mock drafts more and more. These rankings get shifted in that way to resonate with me of, okay, cool. No, these are the guys I'm actually going to be going for.
Yeah, I get that. And I'm with you in waiting on starting pitching to get some upside guys later, like the next pitcher we'll get to after this break. You alluded to this next pitcher a little bit earlier when we were discussing Carlos Rodon, but your number 44 starter is Kodai Senga. So much of this is just health related. I know that you were a big proponent of him adding the cutter at the end of 2023, which and like leaning into it a little bit more, which really kind of helped him kick up a notch.
I mean, he had the cutter the entire year. I just discovered it. I didn't realize that this is what the secret to Kodai Senga was.
I thought he leaned into it more in the second half of the year. I could be wrong because
no, you might be right about that. You absolutely could be right about that one. I just remember in reflection, be like, what is it about Kodai? This fastball is not. Oh my gosh, this cutter just doesn't get hit. Oh, I get it. He throws so hard and it's all around the zone, and nobody knows of this 4-seamer or the cutter. And that allows him to get like 70% strikes in the cutter, and then the splitter is just always there in 2 strike counts, and it destroys them. Yeah. So yeah, it's all about health. Exactly what you said. As long as he's healthy and good, and it does look like there might be a setback, or maybe not. They think he'll be okay. Yes. Is the whole idea. He didn't really finish his rehab when he showed up in the playoffs, Kodai Senga. So it's a little bit different of a off season, but all signs are that Kodai Senga is good to go for the Mets. And in that case, you should be treating him like you did entering the season last year. And that was inside the top 30 starters, guys. Yeah. So I don't know. I see a great strikeout guy with what should be a really good, like a 115 to 120 whip with a good ERA. Like that sounds really good to me.
Yeah. I have him 42 right now and could move him up as high as McClanahan with a healthy spring. I will say it was true. 20% cutter usage in his first 2 months of the 2023 season. By July, he was up to 31% cutter usage.
Beautiful. And how are you finding out that information?
I could find out. I'm just looking at the StatCast pitch by month. But it's listen. It's great on Pitcher List, but it's just StatCast is a little bit. It's quicker.
Unbelievable. He really upped the usage, I would say, starting on the well, it's actually interesting. His first 4 starts were underneath 20%, and then on the 26th of April, he had a 31% usage start. 24, 21, 23, 29.
Game log. That's how I should do it on your
9. And then exactly on June 4th, he threw 29% and then only had 1 game, well, really 2 games underneath 23% after that. So there's your answer. Eric. Thank you for helping us teach the masses about how powerful the Pitcher List player page is with their game log. It's just,
and for reminding me. Game log.
And yes, by the way, everyone, I haven't really talked about this a lot, but we're creating a league sync for in-season fantasy management. For those that get PL Pro, we're creating this where you import your teams, where it's like Yahoo teams and ESPN and CBS Fantrax, NFBC, and you are able to essentially have your all your projections, everything in there. But we're developing inside of it widgets like your player research stuff, where you have the rolling charts and stuff, and also for your team specifically. It's an amazing thing that we're building. Stay tuned for that. It should be launching early in April as an early access. It's kind of like in a beta with the 1.0 coming much later, but it's going to be incredibly helpful in season to help make your decisions. It's going to be a PL Pro feature. So many things you guys get with PL Pro. You can sign up 15% off with promo code podcast.
Infinite amount of things. We don't have infinite amount of pitchers to discuss because we have just one more on this episode. It's your number 45 starter, Ryan Pepiot. He is the last pitcher in your cherry bomb, but it's worse tier. And saw good improvements with Pepiot fastball upstairs last year. The secondaries didn't fully click consistently, moving to a minor league park. Going to be pitching outside in Florida in the summer where the ball will travel a lot. I get it. You and I were both higher on a few, some pairs of Tampa Bay pitchers who we'll get to later. And we both moved them down a little bit as we've gotten into the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, it's just about right. As you mentioned, Steinbrenner Field, his vert, though, is so good. And it's a little weird because in the Trop, it's 1.5 inches extra vert.
Mm-hmm.
So take that with a grain of salt, a decent amount. But still, he got over 3 inches extra vertical movement on his four-seamer than expected. So it's still going to be at least an inch above, at least 2 inches above expected, which is still really good on that four-seamer. In the negative by going to George Steinbrenner Field isn't the dimensions necessarily. It's about being outside in Florida,
right? Which
we saw with Dunedin, and how that allows balls to travel more, essentially. So that's the biggest concern, just so everyone's clear. It would be a really bad park factor for Tampa Bay Rays pitchers, especially going from the Trop. So keep that in mind. But with Pepiot, he has this really good fastball that the Dodgers didn't utilize well enough. And I didn't realize it until it's kind of later into the offseason. I regret it because I remember being on the phone call with Vlad Sedler, and he's like, "Oh man, should I be taking Pepiot? What do you think about him?" And I said, "I'm not into this because it's just a good changeup, and that changeup was really bad, and I'm not getting enough of the fastball." And then I remember putting out a tweet about it, and then someone said, "Why don't you like his fastball?" I was like, "Why don't I like his fastball?" He's up throwing it upstairs. He should be throwing it upstairs. Oh my gosh. And I realized all of a sudden the Rays started to do that, and I felt so stupid. So Ryan Pepiot, he also has this changeup and slider. This was like an 80 grade changeup, but he just couldn't command it when he came up to the majors. He couldn't control it anymore. And we've seen it get much better. It's not quite there yet, but it's almost right there. Then you see a slider that I think is legit. It just, again, needs to be slightly more consistent. But then he also has his four-seamer that I think is an absolute incredible foundation. And that's 3 pitches that should all be plus and effective. So it makes all the sense in the world to me. It's just, he's a little inconsistent, and it's going to George Steinbrenner Field, and it's the Rays who might limit him a bit. And it's just I get a little bit of that ick, and it's, oh gosh, I don't like that feeling. So here's the vibes list, guys. That's why he's in this one where you're not going to drop Ryan Pepiot, but you're not quite as confident.
A little bit of that ick, just a little bit of the ick. I got it too. I moved him down. He's in my low 40s. So yeah, I'll happily take shares if he drops, but I'm not as excited as I was heading into the offseason. That's going to do it for this episode of On the Corner. I'm Eric Samulski, the Pelican.
I'm Nick Pollack, the Lion.
And we'll check you back for another episode of our 5 pitchers, 5x5, going through Nick's top 100.
Oh, we got this.
Jump right in right now.
Let's go.
Hello and welcome to On the Corner, the official podcast of pitcherlist.com. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined as always by Nick Pollack as we continue our journey through his top 100 starting pitchers. We are going to get you through the top 50 today.
Oh my gosh.
So if you are just jumping in right now, we have covered 45 other pitchers. Make sure you go back and listen to these podcasts. We are doing them 5 pitchers at a time. These podcasts come in around 20, 25 minutes each, so this should be great listening for your commutes. And so, yeah, go back through it. We are starting a new tier today. It's the You're Still a Holly, I think, tier. And it starts with a guy who you and I are both down on. You have him 46. I have him 43. He was probably a top 15 starting pitcher in most rankings last year. It's Zach Gallen.
Yeah. What is happening, y'all? We're almost there. And with Zach Gallen, it's so tough. It's like Aaron Nola and Castillo. I was such a Gallen gal. And what's really annoying is that fastball just isn't that good. It's just not a good fastball. And his greatest strength is throwing this curveball that is the true death ball. I'm sorry, Jeff Passan, you got it wrong. It wasn't Jordan Montgomery. It was Zach Gallen on the other team that had the death ball in that World Series. And he gets it lower than any other pitcher. It's one of the highest low lock curveballs in the majors is Zach Gallen's. But he doesn't complement it enough. It used to be a situation where we had these called strikes and 4-seamers low, and then the curveball would go underneath and guys couldn't tell the difference. There's also a changeup that can be very good, but it's not always there. Cutter and a slider that he's always trying to really figure out and not quite nail down. And it's just frustrating. I saw a 126 whip last year from Zach Gallen because he just lost the command of all this. 8 to 9% walk rate. Like, what's going on? He lost strike rates on his fastball, dramatically lost confidence on that pitch. And the other stuff wasn't there to support him. I'm not saying that he can't get that back. They lost Christian Walker in Arizona, which doesn't help his hit per 9. That's always been around 8. And it might be still good because it's a good situation. They're going to let him go 6 innings. Good overall defense, just not as good. Should win some games and all of that. But for Zach Gallen, he's teetering on that, hey, I'm going to help you, right? It's very close to Aaron Nola and Luis Castillo. I think I have a little bit more faith in their arsenal than I do Zach Gallen's, because that 126 whip is just staring me in the face and saying, Nick, it's an 8 to 9% walk rate that probably should stay elevated versus the 5 or the 6 from previous years. The 8 hit per 9 is probably going to stick around. And that 25% K rate is, yeah, that's kind of who he is. It's going to be a little frustrating, I think, with Zach Gallen. And I've decided, you know what? I don't know if I really want to go after this at all.
Yep. I have learned to be weary of pitchers who give up a lot of hard contact. I think I ignored that too much last year. I'm trying not to ignore that this year. And so Gallen makes me incredibly nervous. Too much of his success for me relies on like sequencing and tunneling, and that makes me a little anxious. And so, yeah, I'm low on him. I think he's more of like a low end SP2 type of arm. Your next guy, I have 45, you have 47. He is an upside case, and a lot of people, I think, have him higher than this. It's Houston Astros starting pitcher Hunter Brown, who ended the season on an incredibly high note. I have been in conversations on Twitter where I pointed out he started 2023 also on an incredibly high note, not quite as high as he ended 2024, but we have seen Hunter Brown have really strong stretches, but continue to tinker with the pitch mix, continue to toy with how he's attacking hitters. I'm not quite convinced that Hunter Brown knows his preferred approach. It possibly is how he ended 2024, and that's great, and we could hit the ground running in 2025. But we've seen this in his major league stints before, and so I'm not fully ready to just say, hey, take the end of 2024 and carry it over, and that's Hunter Brown.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels weird that I'm so negative about Hunter Brown when I know that the industry is positive on him. And anytime I see that everyone else is different than I am in this, I always get weirded out. I'm like, oh gosh, what am I missing? You know, am I really looking too much at the underbelly and not saying, look, this is a 25% strikeout guy who just threw 170 innings for the winning Astros and a 349 ERA. And I get that everyone's also saying, look, the FIP backs it up, 358. This is great. Yeah, I get it, guys. But here's the thing. Hunter Brown doesn't have anything that's elite to me. It's a four-seamer sinker approach against righties that is good enough-ish. It gets the sinker inside to righties decently amount. And I think there's intrigue also with like the way that he mixes his cutter, four-seamer, and sinker. But I put this out on Twitter. There's this really amazing app with Max Bay that is the Dead Zone app. It essentially says, look, based on their arm angle and the movement that they get, batters are used to seeing certain pitches move to a certain place. Right. This is just when you release the ball from a certain angle, they're not expecting the same movement. They know, like, cool, if you know lower, that means it's going to get extra horizontal movement. Up top, you're going to get extra vert. Like, it's natural, right? So he essentially puts on the plot these blue circles that said this is where the natural movement is. And then he overlays it with the pitcher's pitches to say, like, all right, this is relative to the expected movement of the normal one. This is where actually it goes. All three of Hunter Brown's sinker, four-seamer, and cutter are dead zone. They're right smack in the middle of the expected spot. That's bad. That is not good. And then you say, okay, well then hold on, Nick. Then maybe the secondaries, like the breakers and the changeup, those are really the ones that do the stuff for Hunter Brown. No, those are not the good pitches. In fact, against right-handers, none of those were over a 10% usage last year. It was just sinkers, four-seamers, and cutters. He had a slider at 9%, a curveball at 9%. Neither of them were reliable pitches for him. And then against the lefties, we had the curveball and the changeup get used combined like 32% of the time, and neither of them had a strike rate over 60% or a swing strike rate above 16. And I'm weirded out. And I thought about this for a moment. I was like, man, how often do we see this? A guy with three different types of fastballs where none of them are actually elite. And he finds a way to get through some starts, but he maybe has a high whip, and it's kind of frustrating. Oh no. You are all going to hate this comp. This is my nightmare comp. Do you know what it is, Eric?
I don't, but
can you think about this for a second? A guy that has been around for about maybe 3-4 years.
Okay.
You know the name. He's had an opening day start. Who has a fastball that just gets hit really hard. He has a cutter that gets hit hard. He has a sinker that gets hit hard. He tries to do things with his slider and maybe it's a sweeper now and a curveball. And there's sometimes he gets whiffs on those, but they're not consistent enough. And he's a really frustrating guy to roster over the years in fantasy. And this year you're not drafting him. He's in the NL Central. He's on the Pirates.
You're talking about Mitch Keller.
I am. Isn't that terrifying?
Yeah, that's gross.
But here's the thing. That's the same kind of thing. He throws four-seamers, sinkers, and cutters, and he tries to get away with that with good command. And there are those days when that command works out and he looks so good. And then there are others, and he doesn't have good movement on his stuff. And I just sat there being like, uh-oh. And obviously, like, I do believe that Hunter Brown is better than Mitch Keller, right? I have Hunter Brown at 50. It's not, I'm not saying actually he's not 50. He's a 47 or 46 and 47. It's just, I'm not seeing the thing that takes Hunter Brown to the next level that makes me believe that he truly is a 115 whip guy and not this 127 that we saw last year, even though he had that good stretch last year. After the beginning of it, it was 162 innings of a 2.88 ERA and a 111 whip, 26% K rate. I get it. I really do. I'm just not seeing it in the arsenal. And the cutter change that happened to him, that he stopped using the sliders much, sure, that helped. But like, it just terrifies me. And I'm not in. I'm sorry. That's it.
Yeah, I get it. I'm just going to move on because I'm really excited to talk about the next pitcher. And it's Yu Darvish.
Yeah.
And I listen, I am currently in an NFBC 50 draft, which is a 12-team draft and hold. In the 19th round, we're looking at pick 219. And I already have 5 starting pitchers. But again, draft and hold formats, you want to get lots of pitchers.
17, 18.
And I'm like, I think I'm going to take Yu Darvish here. And I'm realizing as I look at like the draft, it's like close to his max or his min pick. Like it's almost the highest anybody has drafted Darvish.
Yeah.
But I'm not so sure that I think we are misremembering what his year was last year.
Yeah.
And I'll just say very briefly what I put in my rankings. I have Yu Darvish ranked right now on my updated rankings. I have Yu Darvish 50th. So kind of like similar to where you're at. But I said he had a few injuries. He had that neck injury. He was placed on that mysterious with that mysterious personal issue where he was placed on the exempt list for an extended period of time, which I think makes us think that he missed more time with injury last year than he did because it wasn't all injury. He was recovered from injury and then went on this exempt list. He had a 3.31 ERA and a 1.07 whip in 16 starts. That's just on the year.
Yeah.
If you took out the 2 starts in May before he went on the IL, which I know we don't really want to like pick and choose taking out starts, but we know with 100% certainty that in those 2 starts, he was pitching injured through that neck injury that he then went on the IL with. So if you were to take out those 2 starts, in 76 innings, he had a 2.47 ERA with 71 strikeouts.
That's also including the first game of the year, which was in Korea?
Which was in Korea and was not particularly good.
No, that was just not even a real start. Yeah.
He has a deep arsenal of pitches. We know he can adjust depending on who he's facing. He leaned into the slider more in 2024, which is great because it's his best pitch. If he wasn't even a little bit of a health risk, I think you're ranking him much closer to 30. But he's 38 years old, and so you're banking on the fact that he'll probably spend some time on the IL this year. And so he then gets pushed closer to 50. But I think he's going to be very solid when he's on the mound this year.
Yeah. No, I'm completely with you. I'm even actually convincing myself right now maybe that I should put him above Hunter Brown because the IL part, I mean, really the biggest concern is how much are we going to see of him? Is he going to be hurt a bit? Does he still have 25% plus strikeout upside? I think he does. I think he still has the filthy things that he's always had. I think he's just a very solid pitcher when he's on the field. So I'm cool with IL spots. I am so in on health questionable pitchers because if it's an IL situation, then great. There's so many guys on the wire. Oh, you'll be fine. This is the deepest starting pitching pool we've ever seen, right? So yeah, I'm pushing him up as I speak. So yeah, I'm in.
All right, we are in. We are in-ish on the last 2 pitchers, and we'll get to those guys after this break. Your next pitcher was a big breakout pitcher last year, despite being around forever. But your number 49 pitcher is Seth Lugo. And I think we have long thought like Seth Lugo, quality deep league, like 15-team league arm, great. Nothing he does is extraordinary. He's going to pitch a lot of innings. He's not going to hurt you anywhere. We saw him take that step forward last year. And I think it's maybe important not to overreact to that. Seth Lugo is still really good at taking 1 pitch and making it 3, taking 2 pitches and making them 5. Has tremendous feel for his arsenal. Is not going to rack up huge strikeout totals, which will likely limit the overall fantasy upside. But, and I get that that's why he's ranked below, some of the guys like a Pepio or a Hunter Brown or, Rodon or whatever. But just rock solid, Seth Lugo.
Yeah, the way I see it is that he had a strikeout rate of about strikeout an inning. He had these ridiculous games also earlier in the season, where's 12 strikeouts, 10 strikeouts back to back. Everyone goes, "Oh my gosh, he is an ace." He also had 9.85 before then, and then all of a sudden it settled to 3, then 5, then 5, then 4, then 4. Right? He's someone who shouldn't really be a 22% strikeout rate guy. He needed those big major ones to get there. He's really like a 20%. And when you realize that, you go, "Oh, hold on, wait, that's not quite as good." You don't want to be spending too high on a guy that should be expected for like a 20% strikeout rate. That said, the way they use his curveball is really good. It's a whip heavy curve, and everything else that he throws is just to kind of get him to throw more of those and to make it so that you can just get guys out with that. So maybe a little bit of the slider too in the sweeper. But yeah, I feel like he should be a solid play. He's going to get you wins with the Royals going deep into games. He's going to have solid ratios in all likelihood. It could be like a 115 whip or something like that, 117, not like the greatest. Even though it was good last year, it could fall absolutely. But he should certainly help you out, and that's something of value to me. Is like, yeah, I could say this is like a Toby, but I have more confidence in his ratio performance than I do the guys that I have actually listed as the Toby, or like Toby but wants to be a Holly tier.
Right.
So Seth Lugo's over here.
It's funny discussing him next to your next starting pitcher, who is your number 50 overall starting pitcher, because they're total opposites in terms of that, like reliability and health. And it's Reynaldo Lopez. And look, Reynaldo Lopez was great last year.
Sure was.
We talked about him, early on in the season, of like, we were talking about all these like converted relievers into starters, and us included, were big in on like AJ Puck, DL Hall, guys like that, when the answer was Garrett Crochet and Reynaldo Lopez all along.
The White Sox all had it,
Yeah, they had it the whole time.
Yeah.
Listen, Reynaldo Lopez has always been a if he was only healthy guy. He made clear improvements last year. However, Reynaldo Lopez also ended the year battling arm injuries. It was on and off the IL multiple times. We thought he was going to get shut down, then he didn't. He came back, blah, blah, blah. So again, like, any of your concern of like, hey, he is a major injury risk. He still remains a major injury
risk. Doesn't matter.
Despite what he did. It doesn't matter. But that's why I think, based on what he did last year, I think seeing him at 50 may make some people go, really? Look at his stats. And it's like, yes, the stats are very good, but the profile of the pitcher didn't change drastically.
Yeah. So at first glance, I mean, all I really need to say is an 87% left on base rate. Like, I could just call it a day and be like, all right, guys, let's go. That's it. Fine. And then honestly, that's just so ridiculous that we know it's not sustainable. I think the one that really just messes with me is the fact that he had a sub 8% walk rate, despite throwing this slider that he threw 30% of the time at a 57% strike rate. Like, that's the one that just gets me. Is like, that's your number 2 pitch, a pitch that under a 60% strike rate. And that means that you should have a lot more walks than you do. And he doesn't. He got out of it a ton. And sure, there's a curveball that's in there 11% of the time at like a 60% strike rate. Even that should still be like, no. This is not a sub 8% walk rate, right? We saw a peak season. We all know this.
Yes.
At the same time, he's in that rotation now with Atlanta, and it is a good thing to pitch for Atlanta. There are a couple of reasons. One, they generally like to let guys go long. I know Grant Holmes, the real estate broker, didn't as much, but that's because he was still getting stretched out and everything to be a starter in the first place. 2, you're going to get wins, guys. The second highest chance to win the World Series, according to Fangraphs. And you're going to have a large offense behind you. So that's great. He still gets strikeouts. It's still a good fastball. It's still a whiff heavy slider and curve. And the fact that you're getting him this late means that, hey, you don't need him to work out. You know, I don't mean like doing push-ups and lifting weights work out. I mean, like, he doesn't need to actually be the greatest thing ever for you. So what you can do is you can just draft Reynaldo as your SP5 or 6 even, and then you feel good. Like, I want to emphasize, the first week of the season goes by, you're going to look at your rotation and go, how many of these guys do I actually like? This is a feeling we get a ton, and it's like April 28th even, and you go, what the heck? Why do I have these 3 guys? They're not very good. Like, how did I draft them? And you should just draft pitchers that are just generally good and effective. And like, yeah, Reynaldo Lopez is going to be good and effective. Okay. Like, this is why Zach Gallen is still over there, because he should be good and effective. It's fine. It's not like, craziness. It's not going to be a 5 ERA and like a 145 whip or something at the end of the year for those guys. Reynaldo Lopez should probably be still effective. So, and if he's not, you can just drop him and you'll know pretty quickly if he isn't.
Right.
So yeah, I'm all for it. It's just a matter of when he goes in drafts. And it's interesting. I don't know if I really should be crediting like the fantasy industry or just the smarts of all managers everywhere to look at this 199 ERA across 133 innings and say, no. Same thing they're doing really with Seth Lugo, a little differently. It's more that there are just so many good pitchers that this is the situation we're in. And you shouldn't be embracing that in your drafts. Recognize that at certain points, there are you get more value from pitchers than you do hitters and vice versa. So yeah, get Ronaldo at the end of whatever chain that is, because that's a really good ad.
There you go. You heard it here first. Just draft pitchers who are good.
Yeah. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but like, don't put yourself in situations where it's risk. Like, it could break. Find yourself saying like, all right, I'm drafting this because I think it will be different, as opposed to like watching a guy be like, yeah, you expect him to pitch well and keep his team in the ball game all the time. Right. There's a big difference between those two. And I try to emphasize that a lot with hipsters, because you could be looking at Taj Bradley and just be like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Why am I doing this to myself? You know?
Yes, you can do that a lot when you're watching.
I don't think you're going to be doing that really with Ronaldo Lopez, but if you do, then you'll be gone quicker than Taj Bradley, where you're still holding on to that hope. You know?
You can't.
So it's a big thing.
Leave hope at the door, people. Leave hope at the door. But continue to come back, and you can keep hope with us, at least keep hope alive with us, that we're going to continue to give you that hard hitting starting pitching analysis. As a reminder, Nick's top 400 starting pitchers are up on pitcherlist.com. My top 150 starting pitchers are up on NBCSports.com. Check those out. We'll continue to talk about them and change our rankings as we talk about them.
Oh, absolutely.
And we'll talk about spring training, all that. We're going to get to the back half of the top 50 starting pitchers next. I'm Eric Samulski, the Pelican.
I'm Nick Pollack, the Lion.
And we'll check you on the next episode of On the Corner.